Hello and welcome to Fast Girl Speaks. Today is Tuesday, April. Is it May 26th, y'all? Goodness gracious, this is a bonus episode. So if you're looking for a regular chatty episode, this will not be it for you. Just go back to the channel and you can find a regular numbered episode. This is a bonus episode that's made possible by patrons of the podcast. So everybody send big thank yous to them psychically. Yay! And because of them, I'm able to do these extra episodes. And this one's going to be about a knitter's cast on for crochet. Okay, so I am not an experienced crochetist. In fact, in the past, I've only done granny squares because I do not like to crochet into the chain. Like when you're starting your row, you chain and then you crochet into that. I hate that. And so what happened is I was starting this cardigan, and per the instructions, I chained like 300 stitches or something, and then did crochets into that chain. And so I was going along with my sweater, and I did not love I did not love that the beginning wasn't flexible. So here's the beginning down here. Like, see how much more of the top stretches than the bottom. I didn't love that, but I didn't hate it because I knew it was the hem of a sweater, and it might not be a bad idea if it was a little bit rigid so it wouldn't flare out, because I don't know a lot about how crochet behaves. So I wasn't too upset by it, but what happened is I got a little bit further. I got like this much-ish, and then I realized that I did not like my color choice for this foundation. And so I know that there are other options, like instead of chaining, you can work what's called a foundation row, where you kind of work your chain and your first row of whatever stitch it might be at the same time. But to be honest with you, I found it almost as tedious, and it was really hard for me to see for whatever, I guess because it's fingering weight and like I'm getting older and my eyes are a little wonky. So I did try that, but I didn't love it. And so I got to the point where I realized I wanted to change up my main color, my beginning color. And I was so put off by the idea of starting again, not like the extra work or taking apart this, but just the thought of that really unpleasant, what is for me a very unpleasant process of working that first couple of rows. So I was trying to find other options because I know there's things like Tunisian crochet, which is kind of like this knitting crochet hybrid. And I thought maybe there would be some, and so I know that I'm not the first person who's played with this concept to do a knitter's cast on to begin your crochet project, but I couldn't find a video on it. So I decided to go ahead and make one. So again, I know that I'm not the first person who's thought of this, but I couldn't find a video. So I thought, I'll just make one. And so I just wanted to show you there's gonna be lint on my backdrop. The difference. So what I did for this one was I worked a a German twisted cast on, which is a two-stranded cast on. It's very similar to the regular two-stranded cast on. It's just a little bit more flexible, and I like it usually. So I started with that one. And you can see it's much more flexible. And you can probably see that there is, it doesn't look exactly, let's see if I can get you close. Woo! It does not look exactly like a regular chain and then working into that chain, but especially on a large project like a sweater, when it's going to be the hem, I don't think it's at all noticeable. Part of the reason mine is slightly more noticeable is because with my two-stranded cast on, I was using hand spun. And so one strand is significantly different than the other. So you see a little bit more contrast than you would if it was a regular non-hand spun yarn. But anyway, so it was much faster for me. Again, as a knitter, this is just my specific experience. It was so much faster for me to do than the other option, and I liked this flexibility of it. So basically for me, it was a win-win. So what I'm going to do today is just show you how I did that. Okay, and so what you'll need is just the crochet hook that you'll be using for your project, and then a matching knitting needle. So for example, I'm using a G, which is a 4mm crochet hook, And then the 4mm knitting needle is a US 6. I would suggest that you play with this just a little bit, you know, cast on yay many stitches and just see, because your tension might vary quite a bit from one to the other. But starting off at this is probably a good place, okay? So what I have here is my German twisted cast on. You can find tutorials of that anywhere. And what I'm going to show you is how to work single crochets, like a foundation row essentially of single crochets. And then what I'll do in the next little clip is work with a regular 2-stranded cast on, and I'll do double crochets, okay? So how many stitches do you cast on? Well, what I tend to do is look at the second row of my pattern. If, for example, the second row of the pattern is chain 2, 19 single crochet, or all right, let's just say chain 2, 19 double crochets, okay? Then I would want to have one loop for my chain 2s and then 19 loops for those double crochets. So you want to have a loop on here for each column that you're going to end up with. And in that case, the two chains is essentially just mimicking a double crochet. So it's just one column, okay? So what you do is, first we're going to work, since we're doing single crochets, we're just going to work a chain 1 as our first column essentially. I'm going to use the crochet hook just almost like it's a knitting needle. I'm going to put it through the back of the loop because that is easier for me for some reason. If it's easier for you to work into the front of the loop, go for it. But for some reason, it is easier for me to work into the back, okay? Let me also say that as a knitter, when I have this knitting needle in my hand, I have a really hard time remembering which way to wrap my yarn, okay? Because that muscle memory just kicks in and I want to knit, okay? So I apologize if I wrap incorrectly. Please ignore me. Wrap like you would for any crochet. The whole thought of this is that basically these are just live chains for you. The knitting needle is just holding these chains open. It doesn't have to be a knitting needle. It can be a double point knitting needle. It could be a dowel rod, okay? It's just holding chains. Now these are not chains, but that's what you're thinking about. You're just holding a live loop for you to work from, okay? So I'm going to, if my pattern is chain 1, X number of single crochets. This is how I do it. I go into the back of the loop. I chain 1, and as I'm doing that, I just lift that live stitch off, just like it's the base that I worked into, okay? Then I'm going to do my single crochet. Again, I'm going to work into the back of the loop. As I pull that loop through, I'm going to just lift off like I'm knitting, okay? But working that single crochet. That's really all there is to it. You go into the loop, see? You wrap the yarn. As you're coming through, you just pull that off. And you're just gonna do that across however many you've cast on. Can you tell I've recorded this 3 times and wrapped my yarn incorrectly? So I'm trying to be really careful so as not to be confusing. But you're just going to work across, and that is all there is to it. The last stitch is a little bit hard just to hold on to, but it's no different. And you're ready to just turn and start your next row. And you can see it's pretty. You could definitely tell a difference if you held them side by side, but I don't find that it's unattractive. And certainly for a fingering weight project, you would have to be right on it to really even notice. But it has a good flexibility, but it's still relatively firm. And it sets you up just like you would for the next row. Here's the other side of it, so you can get an idea what that looks like. But yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what it looks like if you start with a regular two-stranded cast on, and you're doing double crochets. So for example, we're going to do, like, if your row is chain 2, do X number of double crochets. That's essentially kind of what I'm going to be doing. So what you're going to do is, again, just insert your crochet hook just like you would if it was a knitting needle. I'm going to try to show you what it looks like to insert this way, but if you prefer to go into the back of the loop, that's fine. Just try to be consistent throughout your cast on. It doesn't really matter because you're going off book anyway, right? So you're going to chain 1, and did you see that? I just pulled that loop off. That's the first loop of your cast on, okay? Just going into that. You chain 1 as you come off, as you pull the yarn through, just, lift that loop off, okay? And then since your chain 2 is just mimicking that first column, just do your chain 2. So you have only pulled 1 stitch off of here. And then you're just going to do double crochets. You're just going to pretend like this is the chain that you're working into. Oops, see, I reverted to working into the back. Okay? Lifting that loop off. And you'll see I kind of just just move my hand to hold on to this. It's just something that kind of happens. But yeah, that's really all you're doing. You're just treating these guys on your knitting needle like it's holding space open for you. Okay? And I just want to try to get across so that I can, well, here, I'll stop here and then I'll show you what it looks like when you get your first row done. It's going to make that makes the double crochet taller because it's almost like it has another loop in it, but especially if you're doing a smaller project, you're not going to notice. You might prefer to, even if it says to do your first row in double crochets, you might prefer to work the single crochets, because with that loop base they might kind of look more like doubles. It's up to you and what you like the look of, but you can just see it's still nice and flexible as you have with the other. Okay, so then let's talk about maybe what could be drawbacks of this cast on. Okay. When you're doing, especially if you're doing a foundation row cast on, it's really easy to kind of basically get an idea of what the finished size of your project is going to be. Like, because you're working the first row, you can see concretely. And again, stretch is going to be different. Things like there's going to be slight variations. But one of the beautiful things about crochet is it's more, to me, it's more almost sculptural. Like you can just see, you're seeing what you're going to get. It's more predictable in many ways to me. And so the great thing about the foundation row is if you're working on something, you can very quickly see like, oh, I thought I was going to need to knit this in a size large, but I'm only going to need a medium, because you can see like what you got. And so when you're doing cast on for the knitting, that doesn't work as well. Okay, so you're like, well, how do I get around that? Well, one of the nice things is if you do a two-stranded cast on, especially, what I would recommend is casting on 10% more. Well, that's maybe a little significant. You used your own judgment, okay? But I'd much rather cast on some extra knitting stitches, because it's not that big of a deal, than working a foundation row again, or a beginning row again. Because what you can do, is you have two choices. You can either work your foundation row, work your knitter's cast on, break your yarn and start over here, crochet across. And then if you're like, oh wait, I definitely don't need this many stitches, you can just pull these off and just unravel them. Or if you get there and you're like, whoa, 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 I needed way more stitches, well, then you can just cast on some more. You know, as long as you give yourself a little bit of extra yarn, you can just cast on some more and then crochet into them. Okay. Now, if you decide you don't want to do that, you're just like, I'm pretty confident that I'm pretty confident that I'm going to need this number of stitches. Okay. Well, what you can do, I like to work in the back, but I don't know why that is. That seems strange. But if you decide like, oh, I'm pretty confident this is what I'm going to need. And you're just crocheting along, doing your thing, chitty chitty chat chatting, thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. And then you get here and you're like, whoa, I need to learn how to put my hook through a loop. I cannot get there. Okay, so let's say I get here and I realize like, oh, that's all the stitches I needed. Well, then I really can just unravel these, trim this, and weave in the ends. Okay, so that could be one of the drawbacks. If, you know, from the foundation row or even the chain gives you a pretty good idea, or at least much more so than a knitted cast on, of what your ultimate width of the project is going to be. So there's ways to get around that. So yeah, anyway, I hope that's helpful, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.